Okay, thanks, Kathy, and here we are. Well, first of all, as you expect, we're going to see and talk about the Rocky Mountains. We're also going to see and talk about the Rogers Pass, which is not actually in the Rocky Mountains, but is in the Canadian mountains in the Western British Columbia. And the crazy Canucks I'm talking about were, of course, were originally World Cup ski racers in the 70s and 80s. But I'm going to talk about some interesting Canadian characters which emerge when you start doing some homework on this wonderful paradise for skiers. A little bit of an introduction. First of all, I see Alan Sloan is there. It was inspired by Alan Sloan's webinar on Scotland about a whole country and some of the issues that the whole touring in a whole vast area presents, including techniques and equipment. It's based on two trips, 2013, when my wife Lindy and 11 of our closest friends went and used the Alpine Club of Canada huts. 2017, we went back again in a kind of modular trip over 6 weeks with different friends and family, including a backcountry lodge visit, which I'll talk about. And this whole thing is underlined by an awareness of the area because of summer climbing trip we did quite a bit way back BC before children to the Rockies, Selkirks, and Bugaboos. And I was thinking, oh, we must come back in the winter. And I'll also talk about a potential next trip that I might be making. There's also tips, all this kind of stuff, where to fly to and where not to fly to, car hire, huts, hostels, and insurance. Some people will know this sort of thing, but it's worth mentioning because you're surprised sometimes what people don't know. And there's the lures and stores and personalities. Right, some of the shots I'm using are stock shots. Some of them are taken by me and my friends, and there's links to films and to websites and everything else, and I've passed those all on to Kathy. So you'll be able to get those eventually. And questions in the chat as we go along, but I'll answer at the end any questions and have a chat. Right, there is the great big place. It's an amazing, and the biggest country in the world, depending on how you define Russia or the Russian Federation. And it is very, very big. I'll show it to you in terms of latitude and altitude. So the dark areas are altitude, down here in the Rocky Mountains and up here in the Yukon bordering with Alaska. And you can also see the comparative latitude. So Reykjavik, Zurich. So a lot of what I'm talking about is down in the southeastern corner of British Columbia and across the border in Alberta. And it's at the same latitude as London. Looking at the country again, there we are. I did a talk on Greenland a while ago, the end of which I talked about the potentials on Baffin Island, which are quite extraordinary. There's skiing like this, which is a route that was done by a team of women skiers, the captain of which was, what's her name? I forgot her last name, Hillary, and this young lady who was one of the skiers, who's a Canadian former World Cup racer, but now a member of the well-known outdoor brands team of women skiers, and they went to Baffin Island and skied some steep couloirs. She was accompanied by this young lady who has done a Baffin double in that she's skied some of these steep couloirs, which we'll have a look at, and she's climbed some of these amazing walls. What's happening? There we are. This is a website of a well-Kent for somebody we know of. And his website is absolutely brilliant because he has lots and lots of photographs and lots of commentary. And it's better than some of the movies that you see because it's just finely detailed and really superb. This is a stock shot from somewhere else showing you these steep couloirs that exist between these big, great walls. And this is, again, one of Hewitt's photographs. It's the kind of reward you get after a 15-hour snowmobile journey. So you fly and you fly again, and then you meet with the locals, and then you have a long snowmobile journey across the sea ice into the base of these amazing cliffs with these amazing couloirs. So it's like world-class stuff, the place that guides go on their holidays. There was a presentation at the 2016 Ski Symposium by Simon Christie, and there is some information about that on there. So if you want to follow that up, there's also, as I said, the website that I talked about. So that's the possibilities up in the far north of Baffin Island. But there are other ski touring venues in the country, on the island of Newfoundland down here in the corner, and on the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec. This is Gros Morne National Park in Newfoundland, where you can ski for miles and miles and miles and not see a soul. And these are the Chic-Choc Mountains in Gaspé, Quebec. A Canadian friend of mine said the mountains, he was very unmetric. He said the mountains are 5,000 feet, the tree line is 4,000 feet. And you can see it's quite densely wooded, but it's remote. They say they get fantastic snow, but then a lot of people do that. And that's about as much as I know about it, except that I know somebody who was keep trying to get me to go there. But it's a long drive from Quebec City, and there's some overnight buses from Montreal. So that's the east of Canada, but mainly what people want to see, if you look down in the corner, in the bottom left-hand corner there, we have British Columbia and Alberta, with the Rockies forming the boundary between the two of them for some time. And that's what people really, when they think of Canada and the mountains, they think of the Rockies. British Columbia, or British California, or back country, is a pretty big place. When you lay it over, it's bigger than California and half of Oregon, a little bits of Arizona. You put it on the continent of Europe, and it reaches from Edinburgh right down to Romania. So it's a very big place. And you see Invermere, Kamloops, Kelowna. This is all where the skiing takes place. Most of it all down in the bottom corner. Right. Okay. If you take a corridor from Calgary, which a lot of people fly to in Alberta, take the Trans-Canada Highway to Banff, to Lake Louise, which are international ski resorts, to Golden, the Kicking Horse, Revelstoke, and through to Vancouver and Whistler. Give you some idea of how big that is. That's Calgary to Whistler is 917K, 11-hour drive. So it's further longer, as it were, than Innsbruck to Grenoble. So again, big, and this is the bottom southeast corner of the province of British Columbia. This is a screenshot that Owen Day had in his presentation. You can see, so there's the Rockies along the border. There's the Rocky Mountain Trench, which is the Columbia River's in that. And then there's the Purcells, Selkirks, the Monashis, and inside the Purcells, the Bugaboos are in the Purcells. And right up to the Alaska border, where there's some very big mountains. This is mother-daughter team skied 1,400 miles from Squamish to Skagway. So that's from down at the bottom there, Vancouver Island, right up there. So Canada is a place for long wilderness ski tours. I know you can ski from south to North Norway, and people have done it. And I know people have skied from across the Alps and across the Pyrenees. But this is totally unsupported. A lot of these people use helicopters or planes to put in this stuff. And I think there's a film about these two ladies who did this. They were, I think, the second group to do it. And you remember the wonderful webinar that Owen gave about Canadian ski traverses, which he goes into them. I'll just mention them simply because I'm not really doing that tonight. He modestly reported that he was the second or third group to do Jasper to Lake Louise in 21 days, including 3 of them, including the first woman. And then he also did something over here in the Blue River part of that. This is Bugs to Rogers, which seems to be a little short one down here, but it's quite difficult and quite sought after. And this is the crux of it. If you're going south to north, which most people do, although I recently saw a video of people, 2 guys who did it the other way. And this is proved problematical for all sorts of reasons in recent years with eagle groups. This is an absolute model of an expedition report, Steve or Jerry, if you're there. It's absolutely superb in terms of the detail of helping somebody else to go and do the same kind of trip. I thought it was great. It was all territory I knew, practically even down to which supermarket to buy your sausages in, and it was really good. And they did part of the Rockies Traverse. I think they did 70K, whereas the Haute Route is 130K. But then if you're doing these Canadian traverses, you may be the only people there that season, and every day it's up to your knees in snow. I know somebody who did the long version, and she said their worst day was 5 kilometers. It snowed and snowed and snowed. Oh, it stopped and they started going. So it can be very, very demanding in the wilderness, and people put in food dumps by helicopter to manage these. This is the first party doing the Lake Louise, the very long Jasper to Lake Louise traverse in 1967. And that interesting gentleman there is this gentleman called Schick Scott, who's one of the first Canadian characters, Crazy Canucks. And Schick has done no less than 10 of those great traverses, including 3 as a guide. This is a screenshot from a presentation which is available on YouTube, which is marking the occasion of his 50 years as a member of the Alpine Club of Canada. And you see him on his special lightweight gear from God knows when, that they actually imported this stuff from Norway, specifically to do some of these long traverses, including one which no longer exists because there's some hydro dams that flooded the area, and they wanted to get in and do this, the big bend of the Columbia River before it was underwater. So there's an amazing sense of adventure and pioneering, and you can imagine in those days what the maps were like, if there were any. Certainly no Google Earth. Here's a website, and it's all very interesting, and it's got a photo gallery, and it's well worth having a look to see what he's been up to. He worked with Dougal Haston in International School of Mountaineering in Lausanne as part of his career, and he's been to the Himalaya. We'll see him again later. Right, Canada does have, changing a little bit here, Canada does have a classic hut-to-hut tour, the Wapta Traverse. It takes 4 to 6 days, depending on slight variance which way you go and whether you have a rest day or whether you get good weather all the way. You have to carry food because the huts, there are huts, but they're not guardian. There's no supplies in them. They have gas and they have mattresses, but they don't have any bedding. So you're carrying food and sleeping bags. It's usually done north to south, and it's along the Great Divide of the Rockies in classic territory on glacier. You finish near Lake Louise. I'll show you a map in a sec. And there's a new hut, which has recently been built in the last few years, which gives a sort of inverted Y, a Western finish. Right, there are the huts. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that the bow hut has wood piled outside it, and it has a chimney. The other ones are human heated, as you will notice, including the little naughty step. No, that's the toilet outside there. So you can see it. No, is that a woodshed? But they are pretty basic, and they're all wired down because of high wind, because of the exposure to high winds, because they're quite high up. This is the general area where they're going from up here down to here. I'll show you on a better map. Just that's giving you Banff, Lake Louise, Golden. You zoom in a bit more diagrammatics is the road which goes from Banff up to Jasper, and the start of the Peyto and the Bow and Balfour, Scott Duncan, and out. So the huts are 10K apart, and there's 2,000 feet of ascent between them. And a lot of it on glacier, as you can see there. This is a map from illustration from the Schick Scott guidebook, the new one, which is a 2-volume set. So you can see that you drive up there, skin up the Peyto, skin around to the Bow. Some people start at the Bow, and then Balfour, Scott Duncan, and out to the road just west of Lake Louise. They've now built a hut over here, which enables this finished the Stanley Mitchell hut, and then there's a long but quite flat out to the road where you come out near field. The Wapta Traverse, the Eagles. The website is absolutely brilliant now with all the yearbooks being digitized, and you can search for anything. And it's amazing what it does. You type in Wapta Traverse, and it gives you this report from 2011, and it also does related ones. The Mount Steele expedition, the 2 big expeditions of recent years, the Bugaboos to Rogers Traverse, and the 1999 Bugaboos to Rogers Traverse. So it's absolutely brilliant source of information. Right, this is Rogers Pass a few days ago. Rogers Pass, as you see, is at the elevation of 1,330 meters. It's on the Trans-Canada Highway, and it is the key to the start of some of the best road-served ski touring in the world. Notice in the top left corner that you must have winter tires, October to April. That's in British Columbia. But if you fly into Calgary, they just give you any old car and they don't tell you anything. So you have to be very careful about what you're getting with the car because the roads are something to be seen and in certain conditions. This is Glacier National Park. This is a hut, which we stayed in. There's so much snow in the Rogers Pass to protect the transport corridor. The Canadian Army fire shells up into the mountain, away from any of the public areas. These are all, you can't go into these areas. Obviously, there's unexploded shells. So they bring down avalanches to protect the transport corridor. The Rogers Pass has been the Canadian Pacific Railway right-of-way since 1870s. And in the 1960s, it became the Trans-Canada Highway. So it's a transport corridor, and it's quite important that they keep it open. So, because it snows a lot. Just to remind you again where it is, down here in the southeast corner of British Columbia. Right, the hut you saw with the glacier on top of this is the Wheeler Hut in the Rogers Pass. When this was first built by the Alpine Club of Canada, it was only served by railway. You had to go on a sort of passenger car on the end of a freight train and jump off. And I met somebody once in summer climbing in Canada who remembers going there when he was at Harvard in the 1950s with Dave Roberts to climb in Western Canadian mountains. If you leave this hut, you can ski on what is the south side of the road into some very interesting terrain. And this is called the Mousetrap, which is the terrain trap to end all terrain traps. Some years they say it's completely full. And above there is where we're actually wanting to go is Young's Peak, which is, and it's got 7 steps to paradise. So one of the routes on there. So we went up to that. We are digging a pit. Martin on the left there is a yearbook member of the Eagles. I don't think he's ever been away with the Eagles, but he gets the yearbooks and then organizes his trips with his friends. There's this. I went on an avalanche course, a 2-day course in Calgary, to meet local people and gain local knowledge. One of which was just to know what things were like in the area. And so we were busy digging a pit there and looking at the terrain. You notice the sharp item amongst you will notice that somebody is on very skinny skis and telemark skis, which was, I think, probably a mistake, and we'll come to equipment later. But anyway, we decided, we're clear, and we'd heard evidence from the people that the snowpack was pretty stable for that year. And up in the top corner there, you see somebody about to come and jump in and finish the test. So this was our destination, the Silken Hut's not a very clear photograph. See it again here. So 7 steps to paradise is the route on the up to the summit, to the head wall there, and you just see the hut in the bottom corner there. It's a 3 to 4 hour skiing up to the Silken Hut. Some people, if you're really keen and enthusiastic, some people go to the hut. An early morning start, you go to the hut, and then they'll skin up and ski down and still get back to the hut. Other people will stay overnight in the hut, which is an interesting place, and ski up the next day, which was our plan. This is Fat Map. So Fat Map is showing you the Silken Hut, the 7 steps up there, but not going up the head wall. Fat Map actually suggests going around this corner and skiing down, which is probably steeper and less of the rollers and probably safer, therefore, and down to what's called, imaginatively, the tree triangle, and then you ski back up that to the hut. So Fat Map is very good in this part of the world, as in other places, for giving you fine detail you wouldn't otherwise get. This is inside the hut, inside the Silken Hut, everybody being organized and hanging all their stuff out. It is quite cozy with a wood-burning stove, you can see there. And this is an eagle in his nest. And there's folks all writing up their diaries. Archie there on the right was with me in my companion de tent in Greenland. The next morning, the group got up, set off in fresh-ish snow. They decided not to do the Young's Peak Stairway to Heaven. They were going to go another Scott recommended route to the south because they wanted to look further into the other mountains. That's the Rogers, that's the Canada, that's the Trans-Canada Highway going through the Rogers Pass, and this whole area to the north, which is amazing. So you get both south of the road and north of the road. Amazing touring from the Rogers Pass. So here it is again on Fat Map. So there's the route up Young Pete. They went this way to the south because they wanted to look into the Canadian wilderness, and they were a little bit they were being very cautious, to say the least, about the snow, the fresh snow that morning. So they come skiing down. You see the angle isn't great, but the snow was fresh. The views to the south were incredible, I'm told. I wasn't there. I'll explain that in a minute. And then they're about to ski down back to the Wheeler Hut across all these avalanche slide paths, which can be sort of concentrating. So you're above the snow where you are. You're up high in a hut, and you're on alpine terrain, which is relatively safe angled, but then you've got to ski down through steeper terrain. That's the challenges of the Rogers Pass. What happened was 3 of us didn't go with them. I had been ill in the night and didn't feel up to it that morning. Somebody else hadn't slept for whatever reason, and somebody else was staying behind because her partner had damaged his ankle. It turned out later we discovered it was broken, so she didn't want to leave him. So we went up the next morning as they were going up to the south. We went up a different way up, thinking we might meet them as they came down. This is a description of where we went. It's a difficult traverse through moraines, gullies, and pillows would not replicate. Well, I didn't know that at the time because we were there in the most amazing terrain, quite extraordinary. And the call here between Mount Utto and Mount Sir Donald, we had actually slept on that in August of 1986 attempting to climb the mountain, but it snowed in August. And climbing the mountain, we thought, was probably just about doable. But when we turned around and reversed the half a pitch, we said, get up it, but you might not get down it. So we didn't do that. So it's just a sort of little bit of history there. And at the time, I said, I must come back and ski here. So there we are on our way up. It's where we were. My ultimate Rogers Pass recommendation, the Assilawat Glacier, is one of my favorite spots with opposing Mount Sir Donald behind the skin track. And that's no less a man than Greg Hill, who skied 2 million vertical feet in 2010. He's a Canadian ski guide now, and he appears in films. And he was on Manazulu when Remy McLuhan was avalanched and killed. So he's a well-kept face in the Canadian ski community. So that's the route we took from the Wheeler up there to Lookout Mountain, and the others had gone up to the back there and back to the Asulcan cabin. So again, just a summary. You can see these maps aren't great. This is much better map. The Avalanche Canada website has, for the Rogers Pass, has very good maps. So there's even says Dome up track, Dome direct, Tree Triangle up track, Tree Triangle west, the Asulcan cabin, 7 steps to paradise. 7 steps to paradise spelled another way, and the forever young couloir. So there is very, very good information in this concentrated area with this map, which didn't exist when I was last there. This is from the 2nd of January, where they had record low snow, but they've had more snow recently. But it's still not been a great season yet in Canada. This is a stock shot. Somebody else, not us, of the couloir there in the middle behind the lady, which is forever young. I hasten to add, we didn't do it. It was quite heavily corniced. But we didn't even go to the top of it. We saw it here. We just thought that's pretty heavy duty. It's just not going to be on. And 2 or 3 of us were telemarkers. And you will remember that telemark is the Norwegian word for not very steep. So we didn't do it. But here's a frame grabbed from a film of somebody skiing it, and GoPro, and there it is. So it's a destination and people, I did hear if people would get up in Revelstoke, drive 70 kilometers up the road, skin up to the top of that and ski down it in a day, which would be a good idea. And hard to beat as a day tour anywhere in the world. Well, maybe not Chamonix. So there we are, Rogers Pass, Calgary, Lake Louise, again reminding you of this triangle down in the corner of British Columbia. That was the warm-up. That was our first course on this trip. We were meaning to go to Stanley Mitchell Hut. This is an Alpine Club of Canada, which is a 1 day and possibly sometimes even a day and a half from the road. Some people have been known to have to divvy. And it's because it's not as close to the road. It doesn't have as many people there, and it has some good skiing, provided you get the good stability. But we didn't go there. We ended up, sure, I'll show you where it is first. It's there. So it's to the west of the thing. And as I say, there's a version of the Wapta Traverse which finishes there. We were planning to come in like this, up a summer road, and then across, depending on the avalanche conditions, you cut the corner, but most people don't. They go this way and in. But we didn't go there because there it is again. And then we didn't go. We ended up at the Dreamcatcher Hostel in Golden, which may be close to one of the best hostels in the world. Wonderful place. And we ended up there because of the Pineapple Express. The freezing level went right up, warm southwesterly winds blew in. They say they blow in from Hawaii and you can smell the pineapples, which is an exaggeration, but it makes for not very good skiing. And the Alpine Club of Canada, to their credit, actually asked, we'll give you your money back. If you say the avalanche risk has gone up to 4, they say, fine, we'll give you your money back. We've already paid for the hut. So we ended up in Golden, going to coffee shops, and then I had a great time. This is an explanation of what happens. This is the Aleutian Low, and it depends. It's a semi-permanent winter feature, and it sort of moves around. So it can bring warm southwesterlies, or it can bring otherwise if it was further over there. And I'll come back to that again. I spent half a day in Golden Avalanche Safety Solutions in an industrial estate, which was a place that sells airbags and air packs to snowmobilers and skiers and maintains them. I had the zipper redone on my then airbag, and talked to the guy about all his equipment. I love that sort of thing. Showed me his bottles and how he filled them and how he repaired them. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and he was just glad to have somebody talking at him rather than shouting and wanting something quick. So that was a little bonus thing on the side of the trip. This is Rudy's Bowl. These are the, that's Claire who took the photograph in the Silhouette and the Rogers Pass, the good photographs. And that was who the other part of the party, Pavla. And there's a big group of us doing various things. This is a Rudy's Bowl, which is next to Kicking Horse. It's not a back bowl, it's a side bowl. And there's a Tibetan prayer flag up there, and it's the easiest place to skin in. You can halfway up the lifts and then you skin off to the side. So a lot of Canadian resorts have skinning quite close in. And I just mentioned that this is Revelstoke, where it's the same Revelstoke Resort, and there is touring. If you get bad weather, you can't get into where you might be going. There is the possibility of this. And that map, this is the side bowls. There's both back bowls and side bowls at Revelstoke. So you could go and stay in a hotel in Revelstoke, ski on the piste, ski in the back bowl, tour in the back bowls. They do heli and cat skiing there, although last I heard when we were there, the cat skiing wasn't running because it just wasn't, nobody was paying for it. This is the centerpiece of the presentation now, is the backcountry lodges, which is a whole new thing, which really is unique to Canada in a way, because they're not really like alpine huts and not really like Norwegian DNT huts. They are buildings in the wilderness, scattered again in close to the roads and the airports and everything else in the southeast corner there. And you can go to any of these. We chose to go to flying by helicopter. There's only one of them or two that you can skin into. They're quite remote. And people ask and they say, no, you can't do it. There's everything from sleeping grizzly bears to uncrossable streams and everything else. So we flew in by helicopter to Mistaya Lodge, which is high up in the Rockies, and actually not too far from the Wapta Traverse. And in fact, if you get conditions right, you can exit from this hut. Instead of by helicopter on your last day, you can go out over part of the Wapta Traverse back to the highway. So it's one of the reasons we chose it. So this is the kind of terrain you're getting. Wonderful day, great snow, just wonderful terrain. I think you just sit there and look at it. Looking up into the mountains there from the building, which I said once in front of the Canadians, oh, the hut. They said, it's not a hut, it's a lodge. This is what it looks like inside. It's all catered. And the guide there conducting the meeting is actually, she's from Northern Ireland, went to Glasgow University and climbed a lot in Scotland, but is now a ski guide in Canada. So that's a setting off in the morning at a relaxed 9:30 start. Mestalla used to sort of market itself as a telemark lodge, so it tells you something perhaps about the nature of the terrain. But increasingly it's used, there are fewer and fewer telemarkers, myself included. It's not quite the same. They had a young ski guide, Canadian ski guide, come out and try and look for steeper terrain for the guests who wanted it. It was there, you could see it, but the problem was they're still getting some of the same clientele, including a lot of repeat business. I know people have been twice. That's Mestalla Lodge. So that's the Walk to Traverse, the classic. So it's on the British Columbia side, right up there in this bowl facing northwest. Right, again, the terrain, you get some skiing in the trees, some skiing to the edge of cliffs. High up, this is for geologists amongst you, an ophiolite, a bit of the ocean, ancient floor, ocean floor, now up at high altitude in the Rockies. And up we went. This was the more typical of the weather during the week, a little bit of good visibility, enough for the helicopters to fly if they would have to, because they said, whoa, we're any luck, we'll get stranded in here, we'll have to stay, but you could see enough. And it was really good because most of the time you could see the hut, and if anybody wanted to have an early bath, well, not a bath, an early sauna, they could ski down easily as long as you went in pairs. So there we are, going higher up into the Rockies and higher again. They're obviously doing a lap there because you can see where people have skied down, then the transition and come back up again and up again. And looking at this terrain and up again to the mother and father of all cornices, right high on a not 10,000 foot summit. And there we are in slightly worse visibility, about to ski these wonderful things called, well, they're pillow lines. And I think actually the rocks underneath might be pillow lavas for geologists amongst you, but there's a bit like sort of a variation on a mogul, although the snow was waist deep in some places in between them. Very interesting stuff. And skiing in the trees, well, in the Alpine on the way up. And again, you can see we're doing a second descent. The whole area is managed. You can tell in a way it's been skied on a week before, but it had snowed and there was 50 to 60 centimeters of snow just about everywhere we skied. Sadly, it came to an end, took the helicopter out, and that was that part of the trip. Again, there's a report in the Eagles yearbook and from 2005, and they did the ski out. They were able to do the ski out over the part of the Walk to Traverse out to go. There's other lodges. They're often run by their guide owners, and they have personality all of their own. Some are big and some are small. Some take as few as 6, some take as many as 18. Sometimes, of course, there'll be one guide, sometimes 2. And again, the Canadians, they all know them. Some people, there was one guy, he'd been to them all, and another one who said, well, we've been to most of them, but we go to Mestalla and one other one. But there's a huge, huge amount of stuff to do. This is the Alpine Club of Canada website, and you can do, they talk about powder skiing, they have powder camps. So they do a 4-day trip to the Wheeler and the Salcombe, which you've seen, and they do a week-long trip to the Alpine Club of Canada's mythical place hut at Fairy Meadows, which some of you may know. They do a lottery. And years ago, they used to do a lottery, and you put your name in, and if you won, if you lost, you were disappointed. If you won, you were terrified because you had to find 20,000 Canadian dollars in 4 weeks, and 20 of your close friends were going to come with you to Canada. You can now put in for 6 places. And there is a report, again, in the Eagles yearbook of a group that was there with other people. But it is highly recommended, but you can book with the Alpine Club of Canada. And a while ago, there were still places available for this year. This is Greg Hill again, and he's talking about the best places to ski in Canada. Rogers Pass we've touched, Revelstoke we've touched, which is where he lives. Whistler we're coming to in a minute. Duffy Lake Road we're coming to. Chicktalk we mentioned, and Golden. Sunshine Village I was underwhelmed by, and we did today on the Icefields Parkway, which was very, very cold. My next trip, right, fly to Vancouver, not to Calgary, again, because people tend to think let's go to Calgary, let's go to the Rockies. Ski in Whistler, where they got 200 kilometers apiece, and there's some really good back bowls touring. On the Whistler side, the first back bowl, there's a rat track in, so you don't even have to do kick turns. You don't have to, so you get in. And then there's a bowl. Then the bowls get progressively more difficult. And Canadians I met while I was there the last time said they would tour in the back bowls by themselves because one, there's always 5 or 6 other people there minimum, and because it doesn't avalanche the terrain. One guy said, I know where it would avalanche and you'd only be buried to your knees. So there's that. But then it gets progressively difficult, as we see, and gives some amazing stuff. I would skin in. One of the few places is a lodge near Whistler, where you can actually skin in and do backcountry lodge. And there's a place called Duffy Lake where you can do day trips from Whistler or the nearest village. And then around the back of Whistler, and you'll see diagrams of all these in a minute, there's a spearhead traverse with a hut and potentially more huts. I would also think of going to Vancouver Island where they get lots of snow, travel north by sea and train. I'll show you that on a map. And here we are. Okay, so you fly to Vancouver, hire your car or take a bus through Squamish, which is the Yosemite of Canada, the big granite cliffs, up to Whistler, ski in the back bowls, go up to this Pemberton, which is a genuine Canadian town, and up here in Duffy Lakes. When we drove to Whistler, we came to Kamloops. We tried to get in down this road, and it was closed because of bad condition snow. They just don't plow the roads that quickly because they're huge distances. We started to go down this way, and they said, no, this road is closed, so we had to go down here, down this road, which was challenging. So there is something to be learned and be aware of about traveling. This is Whistler. This is one of the sunny half days I had. People sit in the queue here and wait, drinking coffee, talking to each other until a ski patroller appears at the top on the horizon, whistles, they start the lift, and then you have the longest run in North America in terms of distance, right down to the valley. And everybody, it's a blue run and it wanders around anywhere. It gets steep. You just go straight through the trees and around and down. And it's quite wonderful. And there's lots of space. And then you have your coffee, your lunch, and wonder what you're going to do. Sometimes Whistler can be heavily skied out by noon. This is, again, jumping around a bit Squamish. That's Whistler, and up in the top there, that's where the Callahan country is. So this is a Callahan Lake. The Journeyman Lodge is there. They take people for 3 days or 4 days, so that tells you there's not really a week's skiing there touring, but it's very accessible. This is the Duffy Lake Road, which is northwest of Whistler, and you could get there for the day. That's 70, I can't remember, 70 kilometers. And there's some this is from, is it Fat Map? No. Anyway, this is the kind of very interesting, and I know people skied there and recommended it. We didn't see anything of it because it was just completely clogged in. That's Duffy Lake terrain. So intermediate, it's called. So that's it up there, Duffy Lakes, from Pemberton or indeed from Worcester. I knew somebody, PhD student, University of Edinburgh, and we went to university for a while in Canada, and he said they used to drive from Vancouver up to the Duffy Lake tour and drive back again that day. This is the Spearhead Traverse. Now this is Whistler. So Whistler and Blackcomb have got a gondola, a cable car, which goes across the top there, but it's a big U, and the Spearhead Traverse is starting in one and finishing in the other, and it is a genuine backcountry experience of a high caliber on glaciers, steep skiing, and there are variations. How long does it take? Greg Hill, he did it in a day. Actually, it took 4 hours and 1 minute, but it depends which exact route he took. But he is incredibly fit and lively and interesting person. Another place I found said it takes 2 to 4 days. It's 20 to 25 miles, traversing 13 glaciers, 9 passes, and done in 2 to 4 days. People used to camp. They've now built a hut there, and they're talking about building others. So this is a Spearhead Huts website. They're trying to raise money to build a proper network of huts. And there's now a hardcover guidebook. So that's either a good thing, gives you lots of information, but it obviously means there's going to be a lot of people there. And the Spearhead Traverse is in the Eagle Yearbook. 2017, the same year that I was last there, a little bit later than I was there. And it's interesting that they said it was a bumper ski season, snow season, but it was also a bumper season of bad weather and bad visibility. So when I was there, you didn't get into the back bowls in Whistler simply because there was no visibility. Somebody I know really was desperate to, so he went with one of these guided parties, meet at 7 in the morning, the bottom of this lift, and pay your money, and you go out with the guided party. He said you couldn't see more than 10 meters. You could ski, but you didn't see any of the terrain, and he said it wasn't that enjoyable. And I think they even bailed out down to the trees, which was very challenging. Avalanche conditions in avalanche bulletins in Canada are very, very precise and very detailed. And they give you 3 levels: below the tree line, and in the alpine, they give you 3 numbers. And there's a lot of detail. Their website is very good. They have this fantastic thing called a dangerator. So you say it starts at 3, and it asks you questions about where you're going, complex terrain, simple terrain, what the weather's like, what the wind has been like, etc., etc. And it helps you work through and give you some sense of why the forecast is what it is. And of course, the Canadian forecasts are for very large areas, although you know that the Rogers Path, that the main office is in Revelstoke. So if you're not far from Revelstoke, but it's not like the northern Cairngorms or the southern Cairngorms. The areas they're forecasting are huge. This is a bit of their database. It's a sad incident in 2017 of an avalanche in the Callahan country, and it's worth, you almost disrespect the people who pass in these cases by not learning from them. Huge avalanche, size 2.5, 100 to 150 meters wide, 400 meters down, crown wall of nearly a centimeter. Third of a party of 6 to descend the slope. Oh, it's okay. Oh, it's okay. Oh. And then he was washed through trees, which is a classic thing in North America. You're in the Alpine, but you're washed into the trees. His transceiver, when they found him, was in the search position. He had it in his hip pocket, whether it was switched by the trauma or whether he had been the tester and forgotten to switch back. He had an airbag, but it didn't work very well. 1, because he was in the trees, and 2, because he wasn't wearing the crotch strap. So an awful lot of sad lessons there, and it was a fatality. But there's a lot of information on the Alpine Club and the Avalanche Canada website, and it's worth looking at it and telling you where avalanche black spots may be. Other sad avalanche stories is on 20th of January 2003, in the Traviata Couloir on Mount Tumbledown, a mixture of a war and an opera, it seems. There was 2 guided parties from the same lodge were avalanched, and there were fatalities. Yes, there's a film about it, which is available, and I've given you the link. And one of the surviving assistant guide has written a book about it. School group of teenagers were avalanched in the Rogers Pass in February of 2003, and it was weeks apart. So was it the same persistent weak layer? Reminding people, this is from the States, but it's a layer of concern. You get the first snow falls, it might rain, it might melt, and then you get horrible stuff. Then you get a little bit of snow falling, and then on top of that, you get this. So you've got a layer cake, which is just waiting to come down. Sometimes somebody said they're low probability but high consequence. They don't get thaw freeze. The temperature is between -10 and 0 for the whole of the winter mostly, or it goes really low, and then you get this hoarfrost on top, and then snows on top of that. So it's the way their snowpack in North America develops and can lead to. Stayed in Calgary in a bed and breakfast when I did the avalanche course, and the landlady said, she was a ski tour, she said there's some seasons we only cross country ski and ski on the piste because there's something really bad down in the bottom of the snowpack. Avalanche stories again, those ones. Okay, there's another one in 2015 when a guide was killed, and there's a wonderful film which is about a successful rescue, which again, you got all the links. So this is Life Ascending, which is about the incident of Traviata. This is the book. This is the case of the kids dying in Rogers Pass. This is the kind of terrain they were in. And you see it's simple touring, but complex terrain. And what happened was they were coming up this terrain here, and they got an avalanche, came right down this side and right up onto what you thought was a safe skin track. This is a second generation Canadian guide and luminary. He was killed putting in a skin track for the next morning for his guests. And on that day, every year in Canada, the guides all have a sort of moments of silence. And this is a wonderful film, one of the best films I've seen. I've seen lots of films in my time. This is a great skiing film, and it's mostly about, it's not a Yoda film, it's not about anything. You barely see any skiing, basically. It's about people telling a story and recreating a rescue. This is the heroine, or one of the heroes of the film. This is the woman who is the park ranger who was responsible for the survey and appears in the film. She's also a mountain guide. Right. Just going to talk very briefly about Canadians' objective dangers or hazards. They have bombs, they have wells, luge runs, sleeping bears, in Owen Day's case, waking bears. They have bush, which you're heading to whack, and driving on the highways, which I mentioned. Right, that's the Powder Highway. So you've got long, long distances and lots of snow driving. I've been twice in cars when I thought, this is it. And I thought I was going to be crash, crash, bang, bang. And both times it didn't happen. So you have to be very, very careful and make sure you've got the right kind of tire. And if stay put sometimes, just stay put rather than saying, oh, we've got to be here, we've got to be there. It's a tree bomb and it looks nice and snowy, but actually inside is a great big nasty ball of ice, which has already broken the tree, and they can come down and do you some damage. This is a tree well, where a very, very big tree at the very bottom actually has a 10-foot, can have as big as a 10-foot hole in it. And people have been known to die by going in head first. I fell in one, very like this guy. I was going between two trees tightly spaced together, and my ski just dropped and I fell backwards. And I was okay. Again, it was a laughing fall, but it was a bit difficult to get up because you couldn't actually figure out where your skis are. But it's something to be careful of, be aware of, and it's unique Canadian. And then the icy whoop-de-doos, which was mentioned earlier in the report from the Spearhead Traverse. You get in these paths through the trees. This is from a guidebook. The route hardens and turns into a bobsled run in a tight creek bed through narrowly spaced trees. Or it can also, the same thing, instead of being icy, will be wet and sticky. And that's, I think, in Rogers Pass, that one there. So things to be aware of. And this is a still from a really good film of a really genuinely remote tour north of Whistler, that area in British Columbia. Amazing and difficult terrain. This is Owen Day's trip, which was an Eagle trip to a base camp in British Columbia, and they had to call the cavalry because one of the moguls, one of the mounds, turned out to be a bear, and it woke up and followed them around. It's not common. That's the only instance I've actually heard of that happening in Canada, but it's a good story. So bears are rare, not like Greenland, Baffin, and Svalbard, where you actually carry rifles are required. And you can buy pepper spray if you're really feeling worried about it. You can buy pepper spray in Canada legally if you make your case, and a guide would certainly be able to buy it. But it's not something I've heard about other than that case that Owen had. Too much snow. This is another great place I stayed in Canada, Whistler Lodge, which is a hostel, just a very lovely building. And this is the kind of thing you woke up to every morning when I was there. And it was a bumper season. You'd be lying in your bunk, you'd hear at 7 o'clock, bang, 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 the first blasting. You'd get up and you'd go off and head up the hill and do your day's work. As I say, sadly, you couldn't get into the back bowls because as soon as you went over there, you sort of lost all visibility. And it wasn't fun skiing. We're skiing on the piste. It was fine. Too much snow? Well, my memory is having 3 half days of sunshine, but I think that's probably wrong because my photographs say it was perhaps more than that. The back bowls at both Whistler and Revelstoke had bad visibility. I went with a guide in the Revelstoke back bowl because I wanted to go there, And the guide said, well, normally we stop here and we look over there for the view, and you couldn't see more than too far. But there was some skiing worth doing in steep terrain and big trees. We tried twice to get. First time, as I said, Pemberton Duffy Lake was closed from the north. And the second time we got as far as Pemberton, the town, and it was too murky. You couldn't ski, and the clouds parted briefly to show the potential, but we weren't able to ski. So that's the Aleutian Low in a different place. And if it works well, it's bringing cold air around, and it's lake effect, only it's the sea, and it's bringing in moisture. So you get huge amounts of snowfall, not coming from Hawaii, but coming effectively from Alaska and the Aleutians. And that was the kind of weather we had that 2017 winter. The only difference between men and boys, price of their toys. Gear freakery, I always love this bit. When in Rome, use North American skis, not tiny, narrow telemark skis, which some of us did the first time. I had black diamond carbon convert skis that wide and that shape for that reason. Lightweight glide light skis, which again are better North American than they would be in the Alps. And Fritchie freeride bindings, not pin bindings, because I could step in easily in 80 centimeters of deep snow. And I was always the first person in transition in the stay lodge while the others were buffing around trying to clear their boots and find their pins. The Canadian guides all skied on Genuine Guide Gear, G3, which is a Canadian company. Those are my skis, had a salt tire on them, got lots of conversations with people about that. This is a wonderful institution in Edmonton. This is Canada's equivalent of PhD. They make custom down goods. My 1986 sleeping bag is still with me. It's been up to nearly 7,000 meters in the Himalaya. It's been to the Andes. It's been all over the world, kept me warm. It was recommended to us when we were climbing there, and it's great. And their prices are in Canadian dollars are cheaper than custom-made ones from PhD. I recommend them. This is the last bit of equipment, stock shot. If you have 70,000 Canadian dollars for a pickup truck and a skidoo, you can get to all sorts of places to ski that you can't otherwise go on these forestry roads, which of course aren't plowed in the winter. And I know people who have done this and recommend it, although I say you do have to be careful because there's a whole new sense of objective dangers, including running out of petrol. So top tips, I said before, go west, fly to Vancouver or Kelowna, not Calgary. Hire your car in British Columbia, not Alberta. Make sure you get proper snow tires. Have your own car hire insurance. We had an incident with a car broken into. Unfortunately, somebody had separate freestanding policy, but could have been very expensive otherwise. Have a Canadian SIM in your phone or sat phone, because we had to be on the phone to the car hire company for a long time, and it was just as well I put a Canadian SIM in my phone. If you're going to Whistler, remember it's a ski resort, it's nothing else, and it's a bit suburban. You need to drive or take buses, a few exceptions, to get around, and it can be quite annoying from that regard. Revelstoke, Golden, Pemberton are real Canadian mountain towns. Go before they get spoiled by having ski resorts as well. You go to places like the Begbie Brewery, the Big Eddie Pub, Chubby Funsters, and the Village Idiot. So great places for the recreation and refurbishment of your calories. Remember to tip in Canada. I did a kick turn once in the Stay Lodge, and they said the guide doesn't get our tip if you have to do a kick turn. The Canadian guides all make sure you have nice platforms, step around every turn. There's lots of information. I've passed some of it on to an eagle who followed up, but I can point you in directions. This direction is you can go on backcountry ski in Canada, and you pay them only $3 American a month, and you get lots and lots of information on routes all over the country. I was sitting in Vancouver Airport about to come home the last time, and I saw this Central Mountain Air. I've been on some dodgy airlines in Nepal, but I thought this is a Canadian one. This is good. Where does it fly to? And it flies up north there, right? This is up here, which is where I might go. I think the next trip would be to go to Vancouver Island, ski on Vancouver Island, take the ferry, and then the train or the bus, and get into this part of the world to Terrace, which is a town. This is a little ski resort called Shames, and there's a whole culture there of backcountry. and there's the next town on the highway. Well, another town is Smithers, and there's a backcountry lodge in there. So that's probably where I'm going to go next if I go back to Canada. An issue is you've got to book in advance. This is one of the places that I would like to go to, and there's only one place for the whole of 2024, which is not unsurprising, but there are only a few places in the 2025 season. So you'd have to be booking the 2026 season and hoping it was going to be a good winter. Summary again, lots to do from the Powder Highway, lift served, inbounds Powder, cat skiing, heli skiing, day touring in the Rogers Pass, or Duffy Lake, the Hut to Hut, and if I put an asterisk, it says you can find out from the Eagle Yearbook. Ferry Meadows Hut, backcountry lodges, fly to Vancouver, do stuff around there and do the Spearhead. And then this is what I'm suggesting, north to Shames and to Smithers. And Bruce, good lad, did advertise a trip once, but I think it didn't happen because he said, the season ends sooner than you might think. Goes from powder to slush pretty quickly, he said. Or I'd go back to Revelstoke and try and do something in the Rogers Pass north side, which I've been there twice in the winter and once in the summer and not managed the north side because there's so much to do, which might be a heuristic trap for me, so maybe I shouldn't do. And then, of course, you can always do a long traverse or two, Bugs to Rogers being one challenge. And there's folk in the club who've done Yukon expeditions. But whatever you do, have a plan B, a CD, and improvise after talking to the locals, because a lot of things just generally don't work out. And that can happen in the Alps, it can happen anywhere. But I think it seems particularly in Canada, you have extremes of weather, including no snow. Bad season, the guide I know went, bad snow, and they, again, talking to locals, they found good snow. This is a summary of the things in the yearbook. So there's masses of stuff if you're having, you want to look at this to read any of this, just search and you get all of these. These are the crazy Canucks, Christina Lutzenberger, Greg Hill, Shit Scott, who I mentioned. Let's call them Canadian characters, they're not big crazy. OG, ever wondered about these boots? OG Free 130 from Dinafit? Well, this is the man they're named after. And here he is in Pemberton, finds a nice spine there to ski down. So it's not just intermediate ski country near Pemberton, it's some interesting stuff. This is the north face of Mount Robson, which is the highest mountain in the Canadian Rockies. It was skied 30 years ago by this man, who I think he lives in the Graf nowadays and works in Kyrgyzstan in the winter. This is Pat Morrow, who is a photographer and cinematographer, and some of the films I mentioned have work by him. He was the first man to do the proper 7 summits. And he's got he's on Facebook talking about his skiing, although at the minute he seems to be somewhere warm. This man is very interesting. He's a father of 2 daughters, both of whom were park rangers. And he's remarkable because he didn't start mountaineering until he was 43. And by 1993, he'd done the 54 11,000 mountains in the Canadian Rockies interior. He also he went to the top of Mount Logan, although it was the West Summit, which isn't actually the summit. And but most people do the 11,000 in the Canadian Rockies, but he did the further ones in the interior ranges. So there's 54 in the Canadian Rockies, and there's another 8 or 9 in the interior, but some of them are actually like a week's walk to get into the base of the mountain. And a wonderful man that he was, he died with the skis on, age 83. So that's encouraging. And this is his daughter, and she's in the film. She's now president of the Association of Mountain Guides. There's a film of her when she's slightly younger, because she's now a grandmother. She said recently, I saw her on the web, but she's in that Wounds for Wisdom film, which I highly recommend. This is a cute little film, 6-minute film of about some silver sliders, sponsored, funnily enough, by Mini, and it's about powder skiers in Canada. And the film is called Forever Young. So that's 2 Forever Youngs, which is Bob Dylan, which we can't have because it's Canada. We got to end with Leonard Cohen. Hallelujah. Thanks for listening. I'll leave the screen sharing on because I might want to go back to another slide.
I break the ice. And my name's Anna. I just want to say thank you. That was an amazing talk. I mean, you really did just go through all of Canada. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. So my question to you, if I'm going to ask a question, is so you want to go up to Terrace, I think. Is that where that's your next plan?
That's yep.
Yeah. And then would you day tour, or would you like do a traverse, or what sort of thing would you do there?
From Terrace, which is the town on the railway and the road, there's a little ski resort called Shames, and there's a whole big backcountry culture there. And you can stay, there's a few cabins, sort of lodges, and so you could do ski on the piste, ski there, and where you'd be able to stay, I haven't quite got quite a handle on that. I think you could stay on the hill. So that's Shames. And then you go further around Highway 16 or the railway, and you get to a town called Smithers. And above Smithers, there's a backcountry lodge. So you'd go to Terrace, go to Shames, do a bit around there, and then I would go into the lodge. That would be the plan. But that's a major trip. I'm able to do these long, 5 and 6 weeks trips of modular things. I know a lot of people are working and can only get a 2-week holiday and go out to do one thing, and are to push that very good report of the Canadian Traverse that Steve did. They had planned it to be manageable. It wasn't a 6-week trip waiting for the weather to get good. It was just boom, fly out, do this, spare days for bad weather, and they were able to do it.
Oh, thank you. It was really good. Thanks.
So Brent, I know that people have been finding is it the Bugs to Rogers Traverse increasingly difficult? Yeah. What's been happening there?
Well, I think there's generally glaciation. So, there's stuff emerges, before it was snow-covered glacier. Mm-hmm. Now it may be horrible rocky stuff, and you can get verglass in these various places. Bugs to Rogers is very interesting in that I was up in an eagle meet in Scotland 5, 6, 7 years ago, and John Kentish was about to go, I think, with Declan and David Wynne-Jones, and he had this photograph, and there's a double abseil on that. And of course, the conditions on that will vary, and you're either doing it with a big rucksack, which is what Canadians would do, or dry bags, so that's very challenging. And then I think with the Declan and David Wynne-Jones and John Kentish, they had like a 5-day snowstorm. They had made reasonable progress. They were pulling dry bags, which was a whole new technique for them, and was challenging because the dry bags would fall in tree wells to begin with. They were camped. There's a little hut they went to, and then they were camped somewhere on the second or third, and they had 5 days of snow, and they had a sat phone, and they had to be helicoptered out because it was just too much snow. The last Eagles trip that didn't finish, I think somebody lost the ski, and funny enough, it was exactly the same place, so they couldn't finish the trip. So that's why those 2 trips didn't happen. The Schick Scott in his presentation, he says it's the only photograph we took on the Bugs Rogers Traverse, and it's them digging out after 5 days of snow. But in those days, they didn't have sat phones. They couldn't call a cavalry, and they just had to make their way out. There's a video in the links of a group of women, 3 women, and obviously the film crew with them, doing the Bugs to Rogers, and you can see the abseils, which don't look quite as bad as they do in some of the shots, the hero shots that people take. And that's a record of somebody doing it fairly recently. So I think it's kind of luck of the draw. I think of all those long traverses, it's the technically most challenging, because of the abseils, obviously. And you're likely to get bad weather in any of these things in Canada.
Well, just as a follow-up of that, you said a very big area. So in Europe, it feels as if people are moving further north. The snow in the south is increasingly not very reliable. More and more people are doing trips to northern Norway. Is there an equivalent of that in Canada? People move.
I mentioned Matt Spenceley, who's the guy they went to Greenland with. He went. We talked when I was there. We were talking about Canada, and he went in. Him and Helen. They went into the Stanley Mitchell, and they skied there. But there was not a great amount of snow. And by their ingenuity and by talking to people, they then went up to a place called Valemont. And Valemont is north of Mount Robson in the Rockies. And it's a place where they do heli skiing from a motel in the town. You stay at a motel in town, which is very nice, and you fly up. But what happened was a lot of the logging roads there was no snow on them. So you could take a 4-wheel drive instead of a skidoo in, and then you'd access the valleys that were coming down off the treatment. He said they were able to go, in Canadian terms, a little bit further north, which is indeed what terrace is. And the trouble is, you go further north, with the exception of Valemont by Mount Robson, you go further north, the elevation comes down and you're closer to the sea.
Right.
So it is, there's always somewhere, because there's so many places. But, you know, you're going to be in Whistler, it's going to be, Whistler, the village is at 600 meters. Whereas Rogers Pass itself, you're starting at 1,300 meters from the road. And given you have to book these lodges a year and a half in advance, it's hard to know what to do, what's going to be foolproof in terms of getting it. As I said, 2nd of January, they said there was record low snow in Rogers Pass. They've had snow recently. It's also really cold there. Rogers Pass was -17 yesterday, Edmonton -35, and Winnipeg -50. You know, we had a heat wave today where it's gone to -12, -15, and -16. But one of the questions people would ask me, what's the Canadian season? My Canadian friends said they go cross-country skiing, but they don't hardly ski on the piste to be in a cold chairlift until early February. And it can finish earlier because the Canadian snow can go from powder to slush in a couple of days. When I was in Stay, I said, oh, that bowl up there would be fantastic in the spring. And they just looked at me. What are you talking about? I said, well, wouldn't it? They said, if we're lucky. They got 2 days.
Wow. Complicated.
Complicated.
Right. Do we have other questions? Yes, speak up.
Yeah. Hi, Brent. It's Richard here. Fantastic talk. I was just wondering if you had any recommendations for ski touring in the Jasper area, which I don't think you really touched on. And just wondered if you'd ever been there and had any recommendations.
I've been there in the summer, both as a kid, and then later when we went on a climbing trip. In the summer, there are a couple of little huts that are accessible, huts from the road. There's a small ski resort called Marmot Basin near Jasper, and you'd be able to skin off the back of it. I mean, the place to do would be to pay the money to Backcountry Canada, the website. Because I didn't do that. I know there is a hut with a funny native First Nations name, which you can get to from the road. And I know somebody who's been there. I could ask him. But I think you find that you look at the guides, you look at the Alpine Club of Canada, it's all tends to be further south and in British Columbia.
Yeah, we did do I think it was our first ski tour, 2 or 3 days long to a hut. But I think it's got a different name now. I think it's called the Waits Gibson Hut. And we've been looking at the website, and it's actually closed during the winter because of caribou conservation. But that's the hut we stayed in sort of about 32 years ago. But that was our only experience in that area.
Okay, well, I think we've got a lot to work through. This is a webinar where you want to take the video on YouTube and watch back through it slowly and take notes. There were so many ideas. Brent, I really appreciate the work you did, giving us all the links.
It's great. It's great fun, and it's the kind of thing you can do in August when you got quiet time. Think, oh well, look at this stuff, and there's just so much stuff on the web these days, both films and as you say, you look at a guide's website of his own expedition, and you think, my God, look at this. You know, it's just and there's huge resources inside the club with the yearbooks online and some of the expedition reports, because people have had money for the expedition and they've written a full report. It's really good.